have mountain snow on the way, lots of it. I'll let you know exactly how much coming up in a few minutes.
All right, we'll check back, Keisha. Thank you. Happening right now, newly re-elected Seattle Congressman Jim McDermott is in Indonesia. He's leading a trade mission there, and unless something is done to change their minds, the Indonesians are proposing new rules that would make it harder for Washington state farmers and suppliers to export fruits and vegetables. Congressman Jim McDermott is live via Skype from Indonesia to talk about the mission. Good morning, Congressman. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So how did this trade mission come about?
Well, it's on the tail end of the first thing that I did. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton asked me to lead a delegation to a democracy forum which the Indonesian government has been putting on for the last 6 or 7 years. There were 16 heads of state here, and she wanted someone who knew about Indonesia, and I'm the chairman of the Indonesia caucus in the United States Congress. So she sent me out here to do that, and while I was here, I thought I'd come over to Jakarta and talk to people about these provisions that they've got around the import of apples. We have had a big, in fact, I walked into my room, and here were Washington State apples on the desk in my office, or in my room, and but they are implementing rules that will make it hard for us to bring up because they're unclear as to what they really want in terms of safety of food. So I'm over here to talk with them about that and see if we can't clarify it.
Where are these food safety concerns coming from?
Well, as in most countries, including our own sometimes, people in the country get a little protectionist, and people here are worried about, in Indonesia, are worried about whether or not this will displace their agricultural production, and farmers are worried about it. And it's when you're implementing free trade between countries, you have to sometimes work out little wrinkles in the way things are done. We import $47 million worth of apples a year into Indonesia, and all of a sudden they've now put some rules in that will make it maybe impossible or difficult, and that's what I'm really here to talk about how we can work these things. It's always a matter of talking to people.
Sure. So how much money are we talking about for farmers here? I mean, it would be huge if suddenly these exports are not occurring.
Well, some of the farmers already have stopped exporting because they're afraid they were first supposed to go into effect in July, and then they moved it up to September. And because I've been talking to them for the last 3-4 months, and it never happened, and now they say it's going to happen on the 28th of November. So this was a really opportune time to come over here and sit down and talk with them and say, can't we find some way? It's not food from the United States that you're really worried about, because we export apples everywhere in the world, and nobody has any problems. So there must be some way we can make sure that apples from Washington State get into Indonesia. And it's really a matter of talking to somebody. You can send letters and back and forth, but it's always better to talk in person.
Do you feel like you're making progress?
Yes. Yeah, well, it was supposed, as I say, it was supposed to go in a long time ago. It didn't happen. And that's because I sent a letter with my colleagues, Doc Hastings and Dave Reichert. We together sent a letter. And then I received the Deputy Speaker of the House from Indonesia, was in Washington, D.C., and he came to my office. We talked about apples. Every time I talk to somebody, I'm talking about apples.
Real quickly, I got to sneak in a question about this impending fiscal cliff, Congressman. What are your thoughts as we approach the end of the year and we approach that deadline as far as the future of this country if an agreement can't be reached? And it seems, again, that we are very polarized in trying to come up with some sort of agreement.
Well, this election was an affirmation of President Obama. He and the Senate put out a bill some time ago in which we extended the tax cuts for people up to $250,000 and then increased the rates on people above $250,000. And That bill has already passed the Senate. This House has now got to face up to the fact that they lost in the election. The people want what the president has been doing, and it is going to be a real come-to-Jesus meeting. I think at some point, John Boehner's going to have to go over and talk with Mrs. Pelosi and say, look, I'm 20 votes short or 15 votes short. Can you get me some Democrats to go along, and we'll pass this? I don't think the Republicans want to go on record as being irresponsible and let us go over this cliff. That worst way they could respond to the election that just occurred, that is slapping the president in the face yet another time. They have got to come to the table and come to an agreement, and they will.
And I think a lot of that is about compromise and both parties being able to find room for compromise, which seems to be a difficult thing to achieve these days. But Congressman, we thank you once again for your time. We appreciate it, and best of luck to you in Indonesia.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
7:34 new this morning, up to a dozen people are feared dead after a strong earthquake in Myanmar. The 6.8 magnitude quake hit northern Myanmar, followed by a 5.